Welcome to Happy Planet, where we speak with entrepreneurs, investors, and thought leaders driving the impact economy. I'm your host, Abigail Carroll. Watch out, Nemo. There's a new clownfish in town, and he's a lot smarter than you are. Today, we're talking with Liane Thompson, co-founder and CEO of Aquaai, which merges the words aqua and the term AI. Liane and her partner Simeon have built a robotic, intelligent clownfish to monitor our waterways. The inspiration came from Simeon's young daughter, who asked him one day to save the seas. So like any good parent, roboticist Simeon got to work building technology that can identify and track environmental changes underwater. Aquaai's Nemo is put to use monitoring sustainable aquaculture systems, measuring and identifying sources of pollution, and is even working to monitor carbon capture. And Nemo is only getting smarter and more talented with time. But let's hear it from Liane. So I'm really excited to have you here. Since we last spoke, I read that you are one of the 50 most powerful women in tech to follow for 2023. So it's an honor to have you here.
I was a little surprised. Sometimes you're just scrolling along on different social media channels and this pops up and you think, oh, really? That's cool. I didn't know. There I am. It's really an honor when you look at some of the women who are listed there. You're just thinking, whoa, okay. There are so many fabulous women out there who are working in technologies, who are working in climate, and it's always a privilege to kind of find yourself next to them.
That's amazing. What's interesting to me is that you actually don't come from that world.
No.
Can you tell us a little bit about your background, which is fascinating?
Sure. So, no, I do not come from that world per se. So I come from media, and I went on to do my graduate work in journalism and public affairs in Washington, D.C., and was first in print and then radio. So I was really thrilled, also from the technology side, as being a radio journalist. Covered some really cool events taking place there as the Clinton administration won for the first time. And it was after grad school that I was at CNN, and I went to the then president, Eason Jordan. I said, I just want to be like Christiane Amanpour. I'd already lived in Europe. I'm actually half American and half German. And I had gone to university also in Germany, where I studied international law and law of the sea. And I really wanted to be a foreign correspondent. And so when Eason Jordan said to me, Liane, just go be one, because it'll take you years and years to work your way up the line to get sent out at CNN. I did. I finished grad school and moved to Budapest, and it was 1994, and we were just putting together a radio show on the World Radio Network. And around that time, another company was just starting out working with small format cameras. And so they selected a few radio journalists around the globe to try out this new kind of high-8 tiny camera. So I was like one of the first video journalists.
Interesting.
I covered the entire region during some pretty interesting times in the early to mid-90s in the Balkans. And that's kind of how I fell in line with what then became New York Times Television. And I relocated from Budapest to New York. I went on to then produce hundreds of hours of television. I was ultimately put on staff with the New York Times and was an executive producer, put Anthony Bourdain on television with that show, and did a lot of both reality and current affair hours after being an executive and managing a couple hundred people. And, I just realized that I'm happiest when I'm in the field.
Yeah.
And then I went to the Middle East and was based out of Israel, covering a lot of the Middle East during the peak of the Intifada and other activities during, I would say, the early 2000s. And then I ended up staying in Israel, kind of got the startup bug. So this is kind of a natural segue over to the startup bug. Israel's a startup nation, and I and a few other people formed a company, media startup, but it was still a high-tech startup, having people shoot through our app so that we could get the visuals and then sell them off to the usual suspects. I actually met my now partner by doing a story on him.
He's your life partner and your business partner, to be clear, right?
He is my life partner now and my business partner, and he was my subject in a story. So yeah, I was doing a story on him. He's kind of as known as the Q. He's really from Cape Town, South Africa. His name is Simeon Pieterkosky, and he had spent a good 20 years in Israel. And he makes gadgets. So he's a product designer, roboticist. He built at least a dozen 2-meter tall humanoid robots by himself over the course of 25 years.
Wow.
He was the go-to gadget guy if you needed a solution to a problem that required mechanical engineering and a product. When we met, he had just kind of promised his daughter to kind of do everything he could to fight, if you will, the climate crisis, and particularly protect our waterways. So when I met him, he was working on a proof of concept of a robotic fish, kind of merging his know-how in robotics and animatronics, because he had built an animatronic museum for Sherry Arison in Tel Aviv, and she's the Harris of Carnival Cruise Lines. So he took his robotics, animatronics, and then he also had, I don't know how many decades in climate technologies like water filtration systems and stuff. So he actually, at the age of 12, while living in Cape Town, South Africa, stumbled into a climate convention. And at the tender age of 12, was shocked about what was going on. He's, 48 now, so do the math. And really wanted to dedicate all his life to climate technologies, and then later it segued into robotics. That's how I actually came to Aquaai, was through him and his promise to his daughter, and through actually just doing a story on him.
That's amazing. But I can see, you were absolutely ripe for the picking on this project, because it seems like all of these themes were already sort of part of your thinking and your background. So I can see how this was actually a really compelling fit for you.
Yeah, I guess, when you cover a lot of horrible situations, as I did, conflicts, disasters, there was always something very beautiful in the humanity of it all, where people really pulled together and helped each other out. And I found myself always attracted to these scenarios. And when I opted to walk away from media was when Simeon and I returned, to my native, to the US. I looked at him and I said, he's an inventor. So he has a large portfolio of different inventions. And I said, let's take the one we care about the most and build a company around that. And we literally, started from scratch in many ways. He a new immigrant, me not really coming from that world, not having the connections, being an older female, no less. We then raised our first, small amount of money in New York and told the investor that, thank you, but we're moving to California, because if you're going to build a robot fish, you got to do that out of California, Silicon Valley. And so we opted to go to Silicon Valley and founded the company on the summit. I really think that the path, as you say, everything kind of came together.
Right. I don't want to get too far along without really explaining to people what it is you've built and what it does. So can you tell us a little bit about your robot?
I'm going to tell you what it does, because the reason we're doing this is when Simeon made that promise to Emily, it was really about how does one navigate the climate crisis and how does one protect our life source. And our life source is water. We all know 71% of the planet is covered in water, and the majority of the planet lives on a water source of some kind, whether it's salt, fresh, lake, river, doesn't matter. And when you looked out what's out there on the terrain, every system that had to do with water was incredibly expensive. And so if you're going to protect your waters, you can't manage what you can't measure. So the first step was measuring so that you could manage. And in looking at the measurement tools out there, either it required human intervention or human, dipsticks of some sort, or even if you looked at your autonomous vehicles that were harnessing data or information with which to manage. those systems were mainly working with military or oil and gas, or were at least targeting those two very deep-pocketed industries. So what Simeon said was, what we really need is an affordable unit with which to harness information so we could manage the waterways better. And that meant empowering all industries, not just military and oil and gas, which we, by the way, don't work with at Aquaai. But Simeon grew up on a farm, so he also knew that whatever you built, it had to be durable and simple enough.
Yep.
But something that a farmer or a person wanted to use, simple enough to use, yet durable and reliable. So that's where our technology comes in, is what we are doing is we are harnessing information from all different water sources in an affordable, durable way. How we do that is we adopted biomimicry and created bio-inspired looking drones. So our drones look and swim like fish, which is wonderful because, 20 million years of evolution probably tells you something why fish are in water.
Right.
If you looked at engineering and robotics anyway, biomimicry is certainly the future, and a lot of that future is already here.
For sure.
We really wanted to make an affordable system. Our patents are mechanics and design, and we use the movement of the tail to swim primarily. So that's really making our units power efficient as well. And so we are offering information that you just log on to a web dashboard like everything else, like SaaS. We call it FAS, for Fish as a Service. You log on, you get your data and sets and your visuals, and we lease out the hardware or the robot fish in order to provide that information affordably.
Yeah, they're paying for the data and the access to the software to get the data, but the hardware is a lease, because I'm assuming that would be very expensive for an aquaculture or other smaller business to try to buy some sort of AI unit like that.
Yeah, so the data is over subscription, exactly. Our initial users came from sustainable aquaculture. That's actually a pretty sweet story. I don't know if you want me to go into that.
Please.
So we actually, living in Silicon Valley, the first question as you try to raise capital is, yeah, great, go prove it, build it. Not coming from some of the chosen universities, which get funding thrown at them. We had to be very creative. And so we built our first robot fish that could tweet your picture. This is going back to 2015. And it was a smaller robot fish that looked a bit like the clownfish. So it was a very small clownfish, and it could tweet your picture. And we did the clownfish for a few reasons. One, to get on the map. Everyone loves Nemo.
Right.
Thinking about how am I going to get people to know about us, and how do I get on the map in the media? And being a sweet clownfish really helped. And we proved it. We said, yes, we proved it. We made a robot look and swim like a fish. And we expected to have all the money thrown to us after we proved it. And that didn't happen.
Wow.
So what happened next was, great, you proved it. Now go get customers. So that was the next phase. You had to, who's going to pay for it? Who's going to buy it? So then, being incredibly capital efficient as we were and had to be, and I really do think that it was, in hindsight, the best for the company is to really be as capital efficient as possible in those early days so that you're not giving away so much of your company early on. And since we didn't have investment coming in, we certainly weren't giving away our company, and we were being creative. So we were able to get a really great group of advisors or occasional team members together to really do some outstanding, amazing things. Our first industry, getting to our first customers, we were approached by a global reinsurer who saw the value as a risk mitigating post-disaster technology. And coming from disasters, we were really enthusiastic about working especially in flooding cases and so forth. And so we souped up the robot to do more than just tweet. It was a much more established robot with different cameras and sensors on it. And we were aiming to do tests in global ports at that time.
Yep.
when there was a massive restructuring, another big lesson learned. You think your ticket or your ships come in and it's going to be coasting from that moment on as a startup because you have this big global reinsurer who wants your tech and is setting up trials in all the global ports. And then there's a restructuring. So after about 8 months of that and their internal restructuring, which didn't make us most favored nation anymore and kind of put us on a shelf for a while, I went out to look in, cash flow. And I was like, okay, so how else that's not going to take a year to put together with some of these larger corporates and instances like government. And I saw a documentary called A Fish on Your Plate, which featured the most sustainable salmon farm in the north of Norway that supplied and farmed incredibly sustainable salmon, meaning they don't use fish to feed the fish to grow the salmon, very, very sustainable. And so I sent a 30-second clip of our robot to them. They said, thinking, by the way, robot fish to monitor live fish, that's a story I can sell, right? Again, drawing from media. And they said, come. So we did, and first test was to see how their salmon would react to our robot. And to everyone's amazement, it was like, 20 minutes, 15 minutes, and everybody was swimming together. We were adopted like one of them from their salmon.
I love it.
And then the next phase was come longer. So we then went and spent 2 months living on the farm, learning really the pain points and how to improve our tech. And we brought the team over and we 3D printed, 7 3D printers there because we 3D and SLS print our technology, which makes us very unique also on the manufacturing side of things. And in 6 weeks, we made 8 robots from scratch, including the boards, and put them in the water and said, okay, to the farmers, break them. And it's kind of a running joke, but this is the Arctic Circle, mind you. They put us way out where the water is really rugged.
Well, you challenged them.
Or they challenged us. So it was really a beautiful partnership. They also ultimately, Aquaai is the name of the farm, and they sell to Whole Foods and Michelin chefs. And so that was a great relationship. And as I said, they also invested in us. And they said, if you really want to grow here, you have to open a subsidiary in Norway, which we did. But yeah, so we are a U.S., company headquartered in California and have our subsidiary in Norway, where we have the bulk of our customers are in Norway or in Europe. So we've been planning also work with the European Space Agency and other seaweed farms and other entities. We have like about 20 LOIs, letters of intent signed from different government groups and customers.
So for starting out, you've really been looking at aquaculture, and I just want to take a little dive into Norway for a second. I've just started this podcast a few months ago, and all roads are seeming to lead to Norway. Now, you've had both perspectives. You've started this in California. Now you have a branch in Norway. I mean, what do they have? How did they build this? Why are they so strong in this segment?
If you look even prior to, let's say, aquaculture, which is not a very old industry at all, per se, a lot of that is coming from fishermen or the diet, the Norwegian diet of necessity being fish. You look at how large their coastline is. So Norway had gone through a big change itself as a country, growing from one of more of the poorer countries in Europe to one of the more wealthier countries because of the discovery of oil, and then because of the salmon market, which, ultimately became a very, very profitable industry for Norway. In fact, they took half of the pension fund and put half of it into developing aquaculture, as well as just their oil and gas industry. So unfortunately, I have to say that they also recently just decided to slap a 40% tax on fish farmers in Norway, which I still don't understand why they've done that. And I do think it's going to harm the entire global industry in aquaculture because they are early adopters of technologies and they're really willing to try everything out. I mean, especially folks like Aquaai. We're fortunate that we got to Aquaai I think it was 2017. So we knew them and had developed a relationship before they were so well known, and kind of now they're pretty famous in the industry. But, these guys are really on the edge of what's new and what's out there and how can we do it better and more sustainable and more precise. So if you're looking at those factors, that brings Norway, they have the capital, they have the desire to really protect the environment and the waterways. Not all, but the groups that we're working with. So those factors, there are places, there's lots of aquaculture going on, but they don't have the resources necessarily to engage in precision aquaculture, which is why technologies like ours are so important, because it's, again, getting back to the everyday farmer, the person who doesn't want to cut corners, but is unable to keep up with demand. So they find themselves just racing. But if you give them the affordable technologies, we're not talking that every technology needs to be $300,000. And I'm not talking about an ROV either, because everyone owns a remote operated vehicle. They all sit on the office floor. But you need autonomy. You need automation and integration and precision. And it doesn't matter if it's a fish farm, a port, or even the smart city finally integrating water into their smart city planning. All of these use cases are important when it comes to protecting our vital source, which is water.
Stay tuned to continue our conversation with Liane in just a moment. We'll talk about more use cases for the Aquaai technology and get real about the funding gap facing blue tech companies. A big thanks to the Maine Technology Institute, MTI, investing in innovation for a prosperous Maine. MTI is Maine's unique public-private partnership whose core mission is to diversify and grow Maine's economy by accelerating innovation in the state's targeted technology sectors. MTI offers grants, loans, equity investments, and services to support Maine entrepreneurs and organizations as they transform their innovative ideas into new products, services, and companies, leading to the creation of quality jobs for Maine people. For more information about MTI and its programs, please visit mainetechnology.org. For a blue economy to thrive, people need to use more sustainable products. But which products? And will consumers actually adopt them? Innovators like you are hustling to figure this out. Spark number 9 can tell you if there's demand for your product. Spark markets your product before it's built using online advertising so you launch smarter. Have a big idea? Vet it with Spark before you build. Visit Spark online at www.sparkno9.com or find them on LinkedIn. Welcome back to Happy Planet. I mean, I've seen that play out even on my farm. It wasn't this type of technology, but we brought in a few different technologies, and then there were technologies that only helped me, and then there were the technologies that helped my team. And the technologies that just served the owner were technologies that usually sort of took a lot of time from employees, but that didn't help them achieve their goals faster or better. And then the technologies that helped them were the ones that were really fully adopted. And I think you're right about sort of the autonomy. If you've got to bring this like clunky thing out there, every time, and then the fish get weirded out by a robot, a robot that looks like a robot, the adoption's going to be much slower, much harder, and you'll get less use out of it.
Yeah, we have actually found, it's even in Aquaai, when we were there last, there has been so much growth in precision aquaculture over the last couple of years. And we've been doing this, as I said, for quite a while now, but we have seen the market catch up, which is beautiful.
Yeah.
We see that there are a lot of technologies there. Most of them are focusing on the software aspect, machine learning, biomass, lice detection, which is beautiful, but none of them were focusing on the hardware aspect. And I mean, there are some, but not a lot. So what we're doing is we're taking all of these static cameras and sensors and we're putting it on our fish-like drone. So we're like this sensor platform that lives and swims amongst the fish and goes along with the school. So we're always right next to the fish or whatever the habitat is that we're monitoring. And what even the farm says to us is that, some of these other technologies, as wonderful as they are, they're still spending a lot of time trying to locate where the fish are. And, the idea is, well, why not just use our hardware and we can tell you at all times where the fish are, and then your zapper can work better. Or proximity to the source is what's going to help you a lot on the back end when you're doing your machine learning or in terms of that. So I do think that the market is big enough, the need is big enough that a lot of our technologies could really work well together. And in fact, there have been some groups that we've done white letters with, mostly from the autonomous surface vehicle market, where we are in their ship hulls and then deploy out at site, like coral to monitor, and then redeploy and swim around the corals and then come back into the hull and transmit the data or charge from there. So there's lots of ways where all of these new technologies popping up in the blue economy can work together. We're very open to that and always have been. And that also comes with people who say, hey, I got a new sensor. Can we try it out on your fish? And we're like, yeah, come on. We have a plug and play system that can hold up to 16 different sensors. And we built it that way so that it could be really, modular for the different use case.
Yeah. Very interesting. I think that the interoperability also becomes really important when we start talking about these government clients that you're talking about, when you're really starting to just try to get data on the ocean and the rivers and the lakes, right? Then it really is helpful to be able to be part of like a much bigger ecosystem of data. Does that make sense?
Yeah, a lot of people are looking to map the ocean, which is great. We're not trying to compete with that. Our sweet spot is surface down to about 100 meters. And most of the challenges that cause the algae blooms is the runoff that goes to the ocean. So if you're able to mitigate some of these runoffs, so let's talk about, ag runoff. So the problem with a lot of our rivers, especially in the States here, is that our rivers are all polluted.
With PFAS, among other things.
Yeah, they're all polluted, and everyone points to the next guy, and they're the cause or they're the perpetrator. But what if we're monitoring in these riverways and we're detecting the high nutrient spikes, and we can then ascertain which farm is the one really dumping in that area, and then try to get them to improve their practices? Because right now what's happening is nobody's really policing it, and nobody's really able to pinpoint where the spikes are taking place. And then it goes to the ocean, and then it turns to algae blooms and the whole problem, and everyone focuses on the ocean. We should really be looking at
it's upstream.
Exactly. Freshwater, reservoirs, and in the case of flooding, especially. So this is an area that I'm particularly enthusiastic about because of my background in disasters and crises, is that, so much of what happens in flood areas, look what's going on here in Europe and Portugal and Spain, and it's every year, and it's getting worse. And in Pakistan not so long ago. So if all of that water just sits there, and it turns very, very toxic. Sewage is in the floodwater too, building up more toxicity levels. So you really need systems that can monitor those toxicity levels before you send humans back into these flood zones. So that's another area that's just really in need of autonomy.
I hope I start seeing a lot of clownfish swimming up rivers. Will you modify the design?
The design is pretty easy. So the reason we're using the fish, I guess, the vertebrae, is because of power. So it really does increase our efficiency, because we're using the indulation of the tail, or we're able to swim with the inertial of the waters around us. Yeah. We go slow, but we are able to swim upstream up to a certain, I think 3 knots is what we can swim against, 3 to 4 knots. As cute as it is, there's some serious science behind our technologies.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure. I just love the look.
And the look can change. And first we were going to make it look like a salmon. And our partner said, no. We love the clownfish color scheme because schools come by to give them education. They really love the cuteness of it.
That's great. Hey, there's nothing wrong with a little cuteness in the world.
Well, and if you look at robotics in general, I mean, unfortunately, a lot of what's coming out of the U.S. is all kind of military, looking. And if you look in other places around the world, a lot of the robotics out of Asia are certainly more adoptable and lovable. Simeon, again, coming from his 30-some years in robotics, he wanted our robots to be lovable, and that way they're more embraceable. In the case of the habitat, we've swum with koi, duck, salmon, and even a cat or two. But that's another.
Oh, that's funny. So where are you today? I think you mentioned you're starting to fundraise. How's that going, and what are some of the challenges?
The challenges are fewfold. One, it's deep tech in water. So millions and millions of dollars are going into climate. What I've noticed is that you have millions of dollars going into everything from, tree protection from forest fires to bees, obviously carbon, and now finally some biodiversity conversations are taking place, which are great. But I never see water technologies being invested in. And so I think the big challenge is that everybody's focusing. I love how everyone's jumping on the climate frenzy bandwagon and investing, but it's not just about carbon. And even if it is, let's look at blue carbon. I mean, Urchanomics is a great example. We've been told by those entities, Brian Urchanomics has also signed an LOI with us, that, we're kind of like the tool. You can't build a house without a hammer, so you can't sequester carbon in the water without the ability to harness the data and what you're doing, whether it's in seaweed or whatnot. So
and monitor.
And yeah, exactly. But it's still, it's hard for, I think, climate investors to engage in deep technologies. So we've had some challenges in terms of funding. We do have a lot of purchase orders, and we've gotten this far through paid pilots and prepayments, and we have now purchase orders that are valued over $1 million, $1.5 million.
Wow,
and
great.
We're doing some really tremendous work in other parts of the world that are very, very promising. We just wrapped a food program with NEOM, which is the Red Sea Development Project, and Deloitte. So we did a 3-month program with them as they're developing their entire aquaculture industry on the Red Sea. We're targeting to do trials with them, and that will lead to significant growth for the company. So I'm really enthusiastic that I was told, I don't know if this is true, I was told we were one out of 1,000 applications that were selected to be a part of this food program, 3-month accelerator, really intense, building business cases and feasibility studies and working hand in hand with NEOM and Deloitte on that. It was a great opportunity. And as I said, there's no shortage of inbound requests from different use cases globally. So where we're trying to do is where we are getting a lot of inbound requests. The venture capitalist world is still very timid, especially nowadays in the US with the recession fears. We're raising primarily from individuals and family offices who want to really make a dent in water technology.
I've heard you speak too about this is a tough stage of investment, right? You have an early product, but you're not fully in the market. And it seems like in the States, maybe we don't, or even in the Western world, the appetite for that segment is low, and it's being filled in other countries by different sources of capital.
I did appear in Portugal recently at Global Planeteers on an ocean innovation panel and kind of express my concern for the gap. And the gap is there are a lot of accelerators, especially in the last couple of years, popping up. There's all these people who want to help you in your early, what I like to call the napkin idea stage. And then, with the promise that you'll then be able to, segue to the next level, which is great. For those of us who are already kind of have further along, we're kind of too far along for a lot of these accelerators and what their asks are. And then if you go to the other side, we're either too late for them, or we're told from at least Series A people, well, go first deliver these 100 units that have been ordered, and then we're interested. So the US likes, as much as we are in terms of great idea places, where we're problematic, that's not the early phase for the $25,000, $50,000 check, or not the later phase for the 20 million, 10 million, because you've already have proven your production line and you have not 5 customers, but you have 100 customers. It's that in-between place, which some people refer to the gap, others call it the valley of death. When your plane is already off the ground, but you're flying over the ocean. And there are other countries, and I'll say it again, Asia certainly is more embracive of robotics, deep tech, and funding that gap, and batteries. I mean, some of the early cars and batteries could get their start in the US, even at MIT, but then they couldn't fill the gap. So other players, China being one of them, stepped in and funded some of those technologies that ultimately became Chinese technologies. And I'm really tired of hearing from impact investors about risk when you look at what's the greater risk if we don't have these technologies. The risk is life. It's not your ROI.
Right. I mean, it's an imperative. So what advice do you have for other entrepreneurs in this sort of impact climate space or aspiring entrepreneurs?
I can only say, regardless impact or not impact, is be true to your gut. You hear this from everybody that you got to love what you're doing because it's hard. And there's some mornings you just say, why am I doing this? Or you read about everyone getting funded but you, and you go, but what about us? It is a roller coaster ride. Even sometimes when someone writes back, I know I have this correspondence with a few super angels and people from even like Steve Wozniak who will say, I love the robot fish. Just no, they don't invest, but they give you those words. Doesn't matter who they are, that I'm rooting for you. I send out quarterly updates consistently to people who've been following us, who I would love to have invest, those who didn't, but just have given us, hey, I'm rooting for you words so they can follow the project. And I think that's important. So for any entrepreneur, I do think that creating a database early on about who you're communicating with and following up with them is crucial, because you never know, 5 years down the road, maybe like Adam Draper, he got my updates for 4 years straight. Hey, it's me, Robot Fish Lady. And finally, I think on the 4th year, he said, oh my gosh, I got to talk. And we were one of his first, us and Coravita were one of his first water tech investments in Boost VC. So also the whole climate thing, I think, is a lot of noise. Not one of our investors is a climate investor, except for Adam, but he's not typically a climate investor. He's crypto, he's robotics, he's someone who sees the future. That's why I liked him. He wasn't a climate investor when I was writing him all those years. But I really think it's about look who you want to partner with, who you like. And I would say to the climate community, especially those who constantly write on LinkedIn that they want to help founders, that you should open up your DM so that you can link to somebody with a note and not just require an email. Because either you're open or you're not open, and either you are dedicated to the climate or you're not dedicated to the climate. And I do think that for all the people who won't take cold emails or cold notes, that's not being open. And so, practice what you preach is what I want to say there. I think that ignore the noise, put your blinders on like a racehorse, hit your target, and just go for that target, because everyone's going to tell you a different way to make a deck. There's a million ways to make a deck. Everyone's going to tell you to do this way or don't do that or be more focused. Just be you, and you'll find your people.
I love it. It's just great. It's great advice. I don't think we talk about the importance of your cap table enough in the industry. I think it's sort of like, oh, we need money, let's grab it. And these are people that you're really going to be kind of wed to. So one, you need to like them, but two, they can be so strategic and helpful. So two, it's so good to have like a cap table of investors that really are going to bat for you and fight for you and help you in those moments where you need a boost. So I think it's really great advice.
And as you go more towards your seed level of investors, it is important that you engage with people who are either A, introducing you to others, Boost is great that way, or able to follow along. A lot of funds have their mandates that they don't follow along, which is fine, that's their mandate. But if they're helping you in other ways, it's important, whether it's telling the story better, whether it's, like I said, through introductions, or just, like being there, answering your emails. You need that from those that you are engaged with.
Cheers to that. Thank you, Liane. That was amazing.
Thank you.
What a treat. Liane is one of many fearless women I've spoken to who are putting it all on the line for their mission. Am I allowed to say badass on my own show? I love how personal the story is to Liane and her partner, and how, as with Brian and Torre, the motivation to build their business starts at home. Planetary health for the next generations. I'm confident Liane will overcome any funding obstacles, and she's going to grow more and more robotic sea animals. I connected her with an upcoming guest who's looking to build a robotic whale. I can't wait to see that happen. Another important lesson from Liane: you don't have to be a marine biologist or engineer to play a big part in the blue tech revolution. It's going to take all of us. Come join the mission. And if you don't know how, send me an email. Thank you for listening. Please follow Happy Planet wherever you listen and leave us a rating and review. It really helps new listeners discover the show. Happy Planet was reported and hosted by me. I am also the executive producer. The talented Dylan Hoyer is our producer and editor. Composer George Brandel Egloff created our theme music. Learn more about my work and get in touch by visiting happyplanetpodcast.com.